Welcome learners, I'm Dipankar Basumatary, teaching English in Gajera School, Surat. In this lesson, we'll discuss the Black Aeroplane, the second part of the lesson, two stories of flying. So what happens is this man was flying his Dakota. It's a kind of a plane, and these planes were used in the Second World War also. In those times, they were used, and these planes are kind of cars. They're like cars. They do not fly very high, and you can actually see out, and it's like an open cabin because the speeds were not very high in these days. So he was flying from Paris to England, and he was really eager to go home, and because he wanted to have breakfast with his family. So he started flying, and while he was flying, uh, he naturally talked to the air control room, air traffic controller, and they guided him over. So turn 12 degrees west now. So west means left, and 12 degrees. This is the way they talk. You have to look at your instrument panel and then turn 12 degrees, and then they are also told to maintain a particular altitude, a particular height from the ground. And he switched on to his second and last fuel tank, and he was hoping that he would be able to reach England on time for breakfast. And Paris was about 150 kilometers behind him. And then when he was about 150 kilometers behind, in front of Paris, beyond Paris, some storm clouds appeared, and these storm clouds were like mountains, and he did not have enough fuel to fly around them or go back to Paris. If he went back to Paris, he may crash. So he had only one thing to do. He had to fly uh, into the cloud. Okay, so instead of going back to Paris, he took the risk of doing that. And inside the cloud, of course, it was black. He could not see anything, and very likely it's very likely that he must have blacked out. He must have been jostled and pushed around by the storm, and maybe he hit his head on somewhere in the cabin, and he blacked out. So everything seemed black, and all his compasses, his instruments started behaving wildly. He looked at the compass, and he could not believe that it was turning round and round. It was dead, and he tried the radio. Even the radio was dead. So he thought that he would die. And when that happened, he could see that there was another aeroplane. Actually, there was no aeroplane, it was himself. He blacked out, most probably, and he did everything to save himself. So he thinks that he saw a black aeroplane. And then he could also see the pilot. And the pilot even waved at him. Unlike planes nowadays, which fly at a very high altitude, we cannot actually wave at other pilots. But in those days, Dakotas were small airplanes, and only one person was able to fly. Nowadays, also you can see Dakotas. So they were waving at each other, and this other black aeroplane asked him to follow him. And of course, when you find somebody trying to help you in distress, you follow instructions. So he did the same. He started following the black aeroplane, the unknown aeroplane, and it started flying towards the north. And ultimately, he was able to land on the ground. And after landing his plane, after half an hour, he was able to land. And immediately after landing, he went to the ATC, traffic controller, and then asked her if there was any other plane flying that day. So after coming out of the storm, he could also see that there was no storm, there was no black aeroplane, everything vanished into thin air. It was surprising. He landed, and he was not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota near the control tower. He thought that he was lucky to be alive, so he was happy to be away from his plane. Normally, he's a person who likes to fly, but that day he was happy to walk away from the plane. And of course, he went to her and asked her if there was any other plane, and she said, "No, there wasn't any other plane. Yours is the only one. Yours was the only one." And she kind of gave him a surprised look because he looked kind of weird for asking that question. Yours was the only one I could see on the radar. So the pilot is left confused forever for life. So who helped me to arrive there safely without a compass or a radio and without any more fuel in my tanks? Was the pilot on that strange black plane flying in the storm without lights? So this is what he thinks about. And we think that it was himself, like I have been repeatedly saying. Anyway, we'll say it again. So let's discuss the questions first. Thinking about the text, question number one. I'll take the risk. What's the risk? The risk is going through the storm, flying into the storm. So this is, and why does the narrator take the risk? The narrator takes the risk to be able to have breakfast with his family in London. Describe the narrator's experience as he flew the aeroplane into the storm. So what happened to him when he flew into the storm? Everything was black, the instruments, the compass, even the radio was dead. And why does the narrator say I landed and was not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota? Because he thought he was lucky to be alive. That is why he was not sorry. What made a woman in the control center look at the narrator strangely? Why did a woman at the ATC look at the narrator strangely? Because of his strange questions, because of his strange story, maybe. He must have told the story to her. And there wasn't any other plane flying that night in the storm. There was a storm up, and that is why when he asked her these questions, she found him strange. Because who would take the risk of flying in that storm? That is why she gave him a strange look. Who do you think helped the narrator to reach safely? Like I told you, I think he himself. He must have blacked out, and his instincts and his training helped him through the danger. Okay, let's move on to the next part. Thinking about language. Here we need to define the word black. The word black can be used in many different meanings. Depending on the context, the meaning changes. So we need to figure out in what sense the word black has been used in these senses. The first one, go have a bath. Your hands and face are absolutely black. So here we can say that black means dirty. Question number two, the taxi driver gave Ratan a black look as he crossed the road when the traffic light was green. Angry or hostile. Here black means angry or hostile, like an enemy given angry look. The bombardment of Hiroshima is one of the blackest crimes against humanity. So here blackest can be described as worst, most despicable crime against humanity. Very few people enjoy Harold Pinter's black comedy. Black means here dark comedy, evil comedy. It's comic but also kind of brutal and evil. You feel bad after watching something like that, even though it is comedy. And sometimes shopkeepers store essential goods to create false scarcity and then sell these in black. So what do you mean by black here? Well, sell them illegally, illegally at a high price. Villages had beaten the criminal black and blue. Black and blue means very cruelly and brutally, badly in simple terms, badly. Okay, next in the next exercise, we need to match these phrases into their meanings. So I've written them here. Fly a flag, which means display a flag on a long pole. Fly into rage means become suddenly very angry. Fly along means move quickly or suddenly. Fly high, be successful. Fly the coop, escape from a place. You can find the answers here. These are the answers. And then there are different words for flying here. We need to circle them or underline them or tick them. Swoop, it's a synonym for flying. Flit also, flutter, ascend to go up, so that can be considered a synonym for flying. Float also, birds float in the air. Then skim, and then dart, hover, glide. Eagles glide through the air, descend to come down again. We can consider it as synonym for fly, fly down, soar, fly high, shoot, not really, and then sail and fly. They both indicate flying. So here I have written down the words that mean flying, that are close synonyms of flying.